The King's Fall raid challenges are here, and if you want to finish the raid seal, get your hands on double loot drops as well as the Harrowed raid weapons from the master version, you'll need to know how to complete them for each encounter. The grass is always greener is the first raid challenge in King's Fall. This is the Totems encounter challenge, and it requires players to not get the same buff, either the brand of the Unraveler or the brand of the Weaver, twice in a row. To do this, start by splitting up into 2 teams of 3 to start the relay race style of this encounter. One person on each side picks up the respective buff to start at each side and makes their way to the totem as usual. Then once you've got the stacks of the Death Singer's power and the second person comes down with the brand claimer buff obtained from the upper platform and takes your brand, you then run up to the middle plate to remove the stacks. But instead of heading back down to the totem that you were just on, you need to get the brand claimer buff from the other upper platform and go steal the buff from the opposite totem. This essentially means that you're just rotating from left to right each time you deposit your stacks of Death Singer's power. If you want to make this a bit easier, the speed booster from being amplified can make moving between sides a lot easier, and watch out for the unstoppable champion that spawns as well as any others that might get thrown in during the master mode. Next is the Devious Thievery challenge for the Warpriest encounter. This one's relatively simple but will require you to be on point in the squeaky bum time moments. During the DPS phase, Taken Knights will spawn and you're required to kill these to extend the aura buff held by your team to damage the boss. To complete the challenge, identify 2 players who are going to hunt for these knights. There'll only be 2 that'll spawn in, and they only spawn in the areas where you didn't pick up the aura buff from last, i.e. the last plate stood on during the sequence prior to DPS. Take your best high burst damage weapons to take down the knights, and then once you've beaten them, you can collect the brand claimer buff. However, once you do, you only have 5 seconds to get down to your team to steal the aura, otherwise you will fail the challenge. So ideally take a running start in the direction when picking it up. However, I find that no matter what, DPS is always best done from this spot here. This is because it's central and makes the right or left knight spawns easy to pick up and steal the aura quickly, plus you can easily move to each of the relevant covers during the wipe mechanic. Coordinate with your team for maximising the timings of each phase and you should get this one done easily. Gaze Amaze is the Golgoroth encounter challenge and is possibly the easiest one. Get your 2 gaze holders as normal for the DPS phase, however before you switch gazes between players by having one player shoot Golgoroth's back, the player with the gaze needs to be stood in a pool of reclaimed light as the gaze is switched. This means that you'll need to jump down into the pit and join the DPS team briefly. Make this easier by getting into the pool with about 5 seconds left on your gaze to minimise any disruption, and remember to watch out for the poison darts chasing you. The Daughters of Oryx challenge is under construction. To complete this one, no player can stand on the same platform twice. This resets after each damage phase. Split up into 2 teams of 3, with one team covering R1 and L1 plates and the other covering R2 and L2. One player will be randomly torn who will then need to collect the blight from the taken platforms. Coordinate with your team and remember who has jumped on which plates, as you'll need to collect 3 blights for each damage phase. The first starting plate will be indicated by a green hue on it, so once standing on that plate you can see where the blight is and get the relevant plate triggered by an eligible player. It shouldn't be too tricky, but remember to keep on moving as there is a timer for DPS. Lastly, Big Daddy Oryx and the Hands Off challenge. This requires some level of coordination again, as players can't kill the same ogre or knight during the entire encounter. Again, split up into your teams of 3 covering L1 and R1 plates and L2 and R2 plates with a floater on each. And then you can essentially do this challenge one of 2 ways. If you've got a team of absolute gamers, one person on each side during each phase kills all the ogres and knights on their side, so that one person covers off on L1 and R1 ogres and knights, and then another person covers the L2 and R2 ogres and knights. This shouldn't be too difficult, especially with things like Witherhoard and Arbalest being popular for this encounter, and then you can rotate through players on each phase. It'll also give you the flexibility if players are concentrating on plates or are torn during the ogre and knight spawns. Alternatively, whoever is covering off L1 or R1 deals with their respective ogre and knights, and then you rotate players through each position on subsequent phases too. L1 moves to R1, R1 moves to be the floater, and the floater moves to L1. If you need more than 3 phases for DPS on Oryx, just simply swap your teams from front to back as required. That's the challenge mode done, but make sure that you're doing optimal DPS with this endgame build.